The 12-5 matchup in the South brings us Colorado State, the 12 seed, winners of the Mountain West Conference, taking down Boise State, against Memphis, the 5 seed, just winning the American Conference. Memphis comes into this game a little bit banged up. Tyrese Hunter probably not going to play. They do have, one of the better players in the country for this season. PJ Haggerty, he's played great all year. Dane Danger's been really good lately. Put up a couple 20-point games in the American tournament. But Colorado State's been, just as impressive. They've been playing great. Memphis, for anyone that watched them in that conference tournament, they didn't want to make anything easy, and that's been kind of their MO all year long. And quite honestly, the entire time under Penny, they just, regardless of who they're playing, they like to make it interesting, like to keep it a close game. Quite frustrating to watch, honestly, if you're ever like betting on Memphis, because they just seem like allergic to covering spreads with ease. They just, for whatever reason, like to give the ball away or just miss free throws. Dane Danger, I think, is like 3 for his last 16 from the foul line over the last couple of games. Just pretty dreadful. But interesting game here in the 12-5. Colorado State favored, which is very unusual for a 12 seed to be favored over a 5.
Yeah, I would be interested to see if that's ever really happened before. I don't really recall anything like in recent years. I mean, we almost have 2 favored. I mean, we're sitting UC San Diego is like a 2.5 point dog right now, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, this game it's definitely an interesting contrast of styles. And I think there are a lot of interesting matchups in this region. But yeah, you talked about it with Memphis's ball security and just their erratic style of play. I mean, 304th nationally in turnover rate. Good thing about that is Colorado State is a really conservative defense that isn't going to turn you over. They're 200th in turnover rate, and they really value getting back in transition and keeping you away from the rim, which I do think that helps against a Memphis team that's fairly rim reliant. They do shoot it well, but they don't really like to shoot it at a high volume. So, and not having Tyrese Hunter, that is a factor in this game. And like Hunter is probably their best deep threat. Like whether it's off the bounce or catch and shoot, he's probably their best guy in both categories, which would be crazy to say 3 years ago.
Right.
Well, we can talk about that on a different pod as we already have, but the rebounding is very interesting as well. Memphis gets all over the glass, but Colorado State, they pack it in, they're conservative, and they try to control the defensive glass. Part of me says Memphis gets all over the glass anyway because they're way too athletic with Dane Danger and Moussa Cisse, Nick Jourdain. Like, they tower over this front court that they'll play Rashawn Bemba at the 5. They'll play Jalen Crocker-Johnson at the 5. They'll play Kyle Jorgensen at the 5. They're a very small, unathletic front court. So I don't like the defensive scheme of Medved. I don't really think it's going to matter in that regard because I think Memphis kind of just gets whatever they want on the offensive glass anyway. And I think at some point, Colorado State's going to start missing threes. Like they're shooting like 45% from 3 during this run that they're on like a 10, 11 game sample size. It's pretty ridiculous, but you are in a good spot to make threes against a Memphis defense that they do prefer to take away the rim. They rotate poorly at times, which leads to some open threes. So I do think they're in a decent spot to continue to make shots. But my gut says Memphis is going to win this game anyway. I know Colorado State is a popular pick. They're due to come back down to earth. They're at one point this season, they were rated 115th in Torvik. They've gotten themselves all the way up to 38th before this game. I thought they were undervalued at the time, but I think they're playing super over their heads right now. They're definitely at the peak of their market. They're at the ceiling. They're due to regress here at some point. And I think Memphis' athleticism and overall talent, even without Tyrese Hunter, is enough to get the win here.
Yeah, I like Memphis here as well. I think, to your point, right, like on the offensive glass, regardless of what the numbers say, like I think that, especially with that 2 big lineup, they should be able to get on the offensive glass against this Colorado State defensive rebounding team who's been good in that area. But like Bemba, like what he was playing D2 basketball a couple of years ago. He's not a very good athlete in comparison to Cisse or Danger. Both those guys, like Danger is very on a you just don't expect the athleticism that he has. But both those guys are able to like sky up for rebounds, and Cisse in particular has a very quick second jump. Sometimes he'll go up and try to tap it in, and then he like lands on the floor and he's right back up into it, and then ends up with a dunk. Like he's a freak athlete. I think the only way that Colorado State can limit that is if they're okay with just rotating guys and just keep giving fouls. Like I think that if you're making Cisse, who I think is a like low 50% free throw shooter, I think he's like 51% maybe, and then Dan Danger, who is 64% on the season, but of late, much worse. At least the semifinal and final over the weekend in the American, he's very poor, like sub 20%, which is just ridiculous for a Division I player. Who also he managed to score 20 points plus in both games, which is still that's crazy. But I think that's their only avenue for limiting them on the glass is, letting them get the or not letting them, but when they do get the rebound, just hacking them and hoping that they'll miss free throws. Because if they do, I think that Colorado State can hang around here. I think it is going to be a close game, but I don't necessarily agree with this number. I think that this is just feeding the public to try and be on Colorado State. Based on the recent hot stretch and like Tyrese Hunter's out, there's a lot that is like wrong on the surface with Memphis, I think. If you look at, they've had a bunch of close games with inferior opponents in the American, kind of struggled, they labored their way to the championship in that conference, but nonetheless, like they still won every game, regardless of what it looked like. So, I don't know. I think that Memphis is going to be pretty comfortable here. Colorado State's not going to turn them over much. They're going to be able to get on the offensive glass. I actually think Memphis might win this game by like 8-10 points. I like Memphis here.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Memphis when they're fully motivated, and I kind of question how often they're motivated in the American Conference, even in the conference tournament, like early rounds. Like I do question how motivated they were against the inferior competition that they played all conference season long. And another note on Colorado State is just I'm not super high on like efficiency based offenses and teams that kind of live off of their shooting efficiency in a tournament setting. We've seen so many times in the tournament teams shoot they start 3 for 20 from the floor, and it can happen to anybody. And if you have no other place to turn, it kind of smells blowout potential. And Memphis like has other areas where they can create value outside of just shooting the ball. I mean, they can turn over Colorado State too. Like Colorado State, they're always looking for great looks. So that in turn is going to create more turnovers because you're probably making more risky passes. They kind of live off like a lot of backdoor cuts, which is like, it's a risky pass to make. And I think Memphis's athleticism can, at least deflect those passes and create turnovers. So I do think that's a pretty major edge for Memphis because Colorado State's conservative defense isn't going to turn over Memphis all that often unless Memphis is, making poor decisions, which could happen. But I think that's a major edge there. I think they have a major edge on the glass. And, those first half nerves in a tournament game, I really don't see Colorado State lighting it up, shooting 50% from 3 in the first half, which they have to shoot the ball well to win this game. It's going to be a different feel for them. I see Memphis winning this game, and like it wouldn't shock me, like you said, like if they win by 8-10 here, just because if Colorado State has an off shooting night, it could be a long day for them.
Definitely. So, I think there are paths for both teams. I just trust Memphis a bit more. So I'm going to look for them to advance to the second round and play the winner of Maryland and Grand Canyon.